Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Arcade Repair Tips interview series. And tonight I have the distinct honor of talking with Matthew Powers from Nintendo Wire. Now, you guys may not be familiar with Matthew, but Matthew recently wrote an article for Nintendo Wire on the new Chuck's Arcade, which is a new concept that Chuck E. Cheese is trying out in some mall areas. And so we thought we'd have Matthew on here to discuss this. And we're so glad that you're able to join us, Matthew, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Jonathan, I'm really happy to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, obviously, we're really interested in the article that you wrote. It got a lot of traction from a lot of the followers on our social media pages and things, which is the main reason we wanted to have you on. But before we get into all the Chuck's Arcade stuff, I kind of want to just get to know a little bit about you. So, what is your history with video games in general? Like, how did you come to love them, and make them a part of your life?
When I was about 5 years old, my mom took me over to a family friend's house. They had a Sony PlayStation. It was fairly new at the time, probably only about 2 years old. And they were playing Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, which is a Stone Cold classic, of course. And I played one of the levels. I loved it. They also had an NES there. They had the Super Mario Bros. With Duck Hunt double cartridge. And I played that and really enjoyed it. And then for my 6th birthday, I ended up getting a PlayStation 1, which was amazing. As a kid, you always hear about those moments where you opened a present that was just life affirming. That was definitely one of those moments for me. And it had CTR Crash Team Racing with it, and that was just a great way to start gaming.
Absolutely. And the nice thing about the Sony PlayStation, it was really one of those consoles that was very arcade perfect in a lot of its ports. If you remember Tekken, Ridge Racer, and things like that. Of course, Crash Bandicoot is probably one of the greatest platformers on it, for sure. But there are also a lot of arcade transitions from coinop to the PlayStation that looked incredible on that system. So speaking, kind of getting into the arcade side of things, are there any particular memories that you have of arcade games, or maybe some favorite arcade games that you have?
Well, it's very funny that you mentioned Namco because the Ridge Racer port on PlayStation 1, that was one of the very first, like, quote unquote arcade games I ever played. I played Tekken 3 and Soul Calibur and Soul Calibur 2 and Soul Edge in Aladdin's Castle that was in a local mall. And that was a really cool experience. I can remember going into that arcade and it was just flashing lights and really loud, like, booming announcer voices from arcade cabinets beckoning you to put a token in so you could get your butt kicked in Soul Calibur. And I mean, you don't forget those things. Those things stick with you. And I think my first arcade experience was probably a Chuck E. Cheese's. We had a local Chuck E. Cheese's. It's actually still around. Um, I wasn't born whenever it was still a Showbiz Pizza, but it is one of the locations that was first a Showbiz and then a Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza and then a Chuck E. Cheese's. And it has stood the test of time. It's still around. It got remodeled back about 2 years ago, and business is still booming there. But as far as arcades go, yeah, that was probably my premier experience growing up.
Yeah, so you mentioned, I will say this just real quick. You mentioned Soul Calibur and Tekken. Those are two of my favorite games of all time. I love both of those series. In my game room that I'm sitting in now, I know you can't see me, Matthew, but I do have a Tekken Tag tournament, which is actually my favorite one of the series. And that is, all of those games are fantastic to me. And Soul Calibur, I wanted a Soul Calibur forever, and eventually I was able to obtain one, but it took a lot of work, took years, and I had to kind of splice together two PCBs to get it working. So it was kind of involved, but when you say those, you're talking straight to me with that, because I love that stuff. And Chuck E. Cheese, man, I remember my brother's birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese when we were kids. That was a big part of our childhood as well. And the fact that yours used to be like an original, like, Showbiz, and then it's kind of made the transition. Like I said, there's not a lot of those original locations left. Most of them have died off just because of, they weren't always in the best location to begin with. And so, once they transitioned to Chucky, they didn't always have the same traffic amount. But I'm so glad to hear that yours kind of has made that transition and is still up and running today. So with all that said and all of the talk about Chuck E. Cheese in there, let's get into Chuck's Arcade. Now, I want to commend you on the journalism that you did in order to kind of discover this. I mean, basically, this all started out as you trying to figure out what a Chuck's Arcade was from, like, a mall listing, correct?
Yeah, so I was in the Chuck E. Cheese subreddit. I have it pop up on my Reddit feed because it's one of the subreddits that I follow, and I saw this logo that looked like the Chuck E. Cheese or the Chuck E. Cheese logo from the early '80s and the late '70s, which would uh, I guess you could call that the Pizza Time Theater logo, but it looked very reminiscent of what people remember from that time period Chuck E. Cheese looking like. And I was very intrigued because the dialogue around it was this could really be the next Pizza Time Theater. This could really be the next Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza. This could really be something. And so I was interested in that logo alone because it's not like Chuck E. Cheese to really acknowledge their past in a modern way. So, whenever I found out that this was a Simon Malls listing, I ended up finding out that not only was there one listing, there were two, and the two were the Mall of Georgia and a New Hampshire mall called the Pheasant Lane Mall. And both of these malls had Chuck's Arcade already listed, already plotted out in their map as to where it was going to be located, what floor it was going to be located on. And they also had a coming soon quote and a mission statement from Chuck's Arcade saying arcade games for everyone. And this really interested me, especially because they actually provided a website link that you could click from the listing of the arcade. And that link didn't take you anywhere, meaning that it did not wrap back around to Funspot Arcade, which, we'll get to what that is in a minute. But that really intrigued me, and it really got my mind racing. Like, okay, so is this just a brand new concept entirely, or is it going to build on top of something that they've been trying lately?
For sure. Now, you mentioned Fun Spot Arcade. Now, Chuck E. Cheese has been kind of playing with some of these different concepts, it seems like, recently. And so, let's talk about Fun Spot Arcade for a second. What is that, and how does that kind of play with Chuck's Arcade, or do you think it does it all?
Well, the interesting thing about Funspot Arcade is if you were to step into one or see one from the outside, it's a mall arcade. It doesn't look anything like Chuck E. Cheese's. It doesn't resemble Chuck E. Cheese's. It doesn't feature the name, the likeness, the logo, any of that. None of the branding. But if you go to the Funspot Arcade website, which is still up, by the way, and you scroll to the very bottom of the page, you'll see a copyright from 2025 that says CEC Entertainment Concepts LP. And that right there is the parent company of Funspot Arcade that was actually designed and created to specifically house Funspot Arcade. That CEC Entertainment is the company that owns and operates Chuck E. Cheese's all across the globe. But CEC Entertainment Concepts LP was created specifically for outside of Chuck E. Cheese's stores kind of opportunities like Funspot Arcade. Um, and so it was devised to be a standalone arcade concept that could fit into shopping malls across the nation or into smaller shopping plazas, as is the case with Orlando, Florida's. They have one. The very first Funspot Arcade concept opened in a Holiday Inn resort in Orlando. And I looked up video of it. I was so interested to see what this looked like. And it was like shoving maybe 12 arcade cabinets or so into a broom closet, is what it looked like. And it had, interestingly enough, it actually had the modern iteration of Chuck E. Cheese and Munch's Make Believe Band adorning the walls, all two of them. But, they didn't directly acknowledge that this was a Chuck E. Cheese's location otherwise. So Funspot Arcade started its run as Funspot Arcade in 2024 with a press release from CEC Entertainment Concepts LP. And that first location was in a Simon Malls shopping mall. And from there, 4 other locations have ended up opening. And that's where we're at in 2025, up until this Chuck's Arcade story, which makes things more interesting.
So let's talk about, is there any kind of relation between the two? Do you think that Chuck's Arcade is just a rebranding of Funspot Arcade, or do you think that they're two separate entities? I mean, at this point, we may not know all the details, but what are your thoughts as far as the relationship between the two?
Mark Kupferman, who is the chief executive officer and vice president of Chuck E. Cheese's CEC Entertainment, he actually commented on a Reddit post that I made in the Chuck E. Cheese subreddit whenever I started to really dig into what this Chuck's Arcade concept was. And he confirmed in his wording, because he was kind enough to basically do this in a Q&A kind of format where we were the people who were asking the questions hypothetically and he was answering them. He would bold text any question that we were potentially asking or that he had been asked, and then he would answer it in normal text, and it was a paragraph or so. And he actually confirmed that Chuck's Arcade is an extension of Funspot Arcade. It is, yes, a rebranding.
Okay.
And he admitted that they want to acknowledge Chuck E. Cheese directly in their branding for this arcade. And the reason that they're using the old kind of looking Chuck E. Cheese that has the bowler hat on that people remember from the 80s and 90s, they're doing that because they want to directly acknowledge their past. And that's a pretty big move for them, because if you go to a Chuck E. Cheese's nowadays, there is no remnant of what they used to be.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the characters may be the only thing that's really left of like the old Chuck E. Cheese remnants, as you're talking about. I mean, obviously the layouts are different, the games are different. I mean, the stores are completely different. Even the ones like yours that probably started out as showbiz have been completely remodeled and changed since then. And yeah, you're right. So Chuck E. Cheese has been reluctant, it seems like, to dive back into that past nostalgia for some reason. I'm glad that they're doing it. I think this is going to be a positive thing overall. But I don't know why it's taking them so long to do it, I guess, is the bigger question. But it doesn't matter to me. As long as we're getting it, I think that's going to be good. Now, you mentioned Funspot Arcade, which sounds more like a traditional like mall arcade. Is that what we're expecting with Chuck's Arcade? Or are we going to get something more like a Chuck E. Cheese, or kind of a hybrid of the two?
So it's interesting that you ask this, because just before we did this interview, on the Chuck E. Cheese subreddit, someone was, uh, let's say, ambitious enough to travel to Pheasant Lane Mall and actually photograph what the inside of a Chuck's Arcade interior looks like. And it is very similar to a Fun Spot, except for the actual decor. The art adorning the walls is retro. It's a retro, but a modern take on like retro. So to kind of specify and emphasize what I'm talking about here, the the images that I've seen, they showed very similar to what a modern Chuck E. Cheese looks like after it's had what they call a 2.0 remodel. On the wall at a modern Chuck E. Cheese, you would see a mural that has Chuck E. Cheese's face on it, the modern Chuck E. Cheese, and a Space Invaders logo with some kind of video gamey looking pixel art, and it looks kind of washed out on the wall. They do that to try to make it look modern, kind of classy. So what Chuck's Arcade is going for is a similar concept, but it's very colorful. It's very 70s. It's black background. It's got the Chuck's Arcade logo. It's like a wall wrap of art that's complete. It's got the Chuck's Arcade logo twice. One logo is the logo that we've already seen, and the other logo looks like the Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater logo with the way that the font for the letters looks for Chuck's Arcade. And then the other portion of it is there is a Space Invader that looks pixelated like you would see in the arcade game. There is an Atari CX40 joystick. It looks like there might even be a missile command ship that's firing at something, but I can't quite confirm. It's a little bit pixelated in the photograph, so I can't see it too well. And then you actually have the Pizza Time Theater Chuck E. Cheese's face pretty prominently featured in the artwork, and it's got like this 70s like rainbow like wraparound on the walls, and it also has like a pixelated token artwork as well. So what they're going for is something retro that also could look like modern, kind of chic. You know what I mean?
Right. So obviously, I think in your original article, you also the response from the was it I forget what the name of the guy was from Chuck E. Cheese, but he said that this is going to have mostly modern games. It didn't sound like they were going for classics, but I was pointing out to some of our followers that a lot of classics have now been remade into new cabinets. We have things like Galaga Assault, which is like a redemption version of Galaga. We have Pac-Man Battle Royale. We have Space Invaders Frenzy. We have these are basically modern takes on old arcade games. And so I would expect that this kind of location may have stuff like that. But most of our followers would really like to know if there's any chance, do you think that there's any chance that we could see any kind of classic or actual retro games, especially considering the decor that you described here? Is there any chance, do you think, that we could see anything like that? Obviously, the message from the Chuck E. Cheese representative did not sound positive on that front, so...
I don't personally think that we're going to see that happen with this brand, at least not at first. Funspot Arcade was very much a trial run, and Mark Kupferman was actually pretty quick to admit that in the comment that he left on that Reddit post. And whenever he says modern arcade games, I did actually kind of look through the Facebook comments on the post that you guys made on your Arcade Repair Tips Facebook page. And thank you for sharing the article, by the way. That was very kind of you.
Of course.
I did notice a lot of your fan base was actually referring to like redemption games. And I do not think that this is the kind of arcade that we're looking at. I really do think what you're going to see, because this is what Funspot Arcade has primarily focused on, you're going to see a lot of raw thrills games. So you're going to see VR, you're going to see Cruisin', you're going to see Fast and Furious, Godzilla, King Kong, Jurassic Park, and I think you'll probably, if what we're thinking makes sense, with it being an Atari referenced arcade, we would probably see modern Atari games like Space Invaders, like the Centipede game that they did, that I can't remember the name of, but I've definitely played at a local arcade. I really do think we'll see concepts like that at least try to cross over into that space. But I can't stress enough how much I think it's a missed opportunity that they're not at least trying to bring back tokens in some capacity, at least for nostalgia purposes, because as of last year, Chuck E. Cheese is still printing tokens for every single year. Now, I don't know if that extends to 2025, but there was a 2024 Chuck E. Cheese token, because there are still Chuck E. Cheese locations that use tokens. Now, I don't know if that's true for tickets, but it'd be so cool if they could at least do the idea of bringing back tokens just for these locations.
For sure, and obviously, as a fan of classic arcade games, we love tokens. When we had our own location, we actually had our own tokens minted, which I still have some of. But I will say that there's a lot of... After going the card route, Matthew, like, the headaches that come with tokens are almost not worth it. Because like with tokens, you have coin jams, you have kind of all of the physical mechanisms that kind of go into that, along with coin switches and things like that. With the modern card systems, I mean, there's no moving parts, so they're pretty reliable all the time. You can lower the price of every game in an instant, which is amazing. You can do audits on all of your games, and so I would love for them to bring tokens back. But I think from their perspective, I think that'd be a pretty hard sell on them. They've tried so hard to transition stores. Of course, my co-host Tim, before he left Chuck E. Cheese, he was involved in the transition at his store, and it is kind of a pain to get it through. But once we got it through, we loved it, because I didn't have to mess with coin jams anymore. I didn't have to mess with auditing all my games, counting all the tokens every Monday. Every Monday, Matthew, you may not realize, they would go through and do an audit on every game, make sure the coin counter on the game matches the amount of tokens in the game, all that kind of stuff. And that took basically an entire morning from like 6 a.m. all the way up to open for them to do that. And now with the card system, they don't even worry about that. And so as much as I'm with you, I would love for them to bring tokens back. I think it may be a hard sell on there, and just because of all of the upkeep and physical nature that comes with tokens just being so demanding on labor. And it seems like over the years they've really tried to cut that. So but if they do it, man, I would love it. So if you're listening out there, any kind of representatives for Chuck E. Cheese, I know it's a lot of work, but please consider it. So
I think it would be so cool, especially even if they didn't bring tokens back for actual use in the stores, but they actually sold or even gave away or would allow you to win like packs of tokens from throughout the years, including a 2025 one, or at least give a souvenir 2025 Chuck's Arcade token out. How cool would that be? People would want to go just to get that souvenir. And I feel like if they're not going to do ticket redemption, which I understand, it's a small location. You're not going to have more than 2 or 3 workers probably on site, if even that, considering what the size of the arcade is going to be. It's going to be pretty hands off, I feel like. And it's kind of similar to how movie theaters, they don't have projectionists anymore. They just have a Blu-ray or a DVD or a file that they torrent or whatever, and then they stream it to a projector to have people watch it. Now you don't have to have, arcade attendants like putting tickets in the machines and making sure they don't get stuck. And like you said, making sure there's no token jams happening. So it's able to be much more hands off. And I'm sure you know way more about that than I do. But I just think it'd be so cool if they were at least to try to lean into the retro aspect, even if it's aesthetic.
For sure, and I think that's a good idea to maybe do it in some form or fashion where, like you said, it's more aesthetic than even if you made instead of doing cards, if you made big tokens that you use to tap the games instead of the cards, I mean, it could be something as simple as that I think would trigger a lot of nostalgia in people, especially my age, who remember going to Chuck E. Cheese. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I think it'd be really cool, and I know that the Chuck E. Cheese fan base is absolutely wild over the idea that they're utilizing any form of retro aesthetic or concept for any Chuck E. Cheese adjacent idea or location. And they were really hoping for the animatronics to at least make somewhat of an appearance, or for them to feature the characters in stores, like to have a mascot on site. And while those are all great ideas, I don't think that this concept is quite that far reaching. And I really do just think it's to get Chuck E. Cheese's face in the face of people that don't normally see it or haven't seen it in a very long time. And it's reminding them of their past and of the fun times they had at Chuck E. Cheese's, and they can share that with their kids without having to go to a modern day Chuck E. Cheese and experience the chaos of that.
for sure, and I like you mentioned that you didn't think there was going to be a lot of redemption. I think a lot of our audience is very receptive to that, because I do feel like redemption kind of turns it into a kid's casino, if you will. And I mean, I've never seen redemption like that. My kids love. I mean, the thing with redemption is, like, I'm playing games, but I also get to earn a prize. So to me, it's always like I'm still playing the games that I normally play, but I have this opportunity to maybe get an extra thing. And so that's always how I've looked at it. Some people say kids casinos. Like I said, that's a different mentality for those people. But I definitely, I don't have a problem with redemption. If you're going to do a mall arcade style, it may be better, especially if you're shorthanded on labor, to do something like self-redemption, a lot of crane machines or something like that, to where, it's like you just earn the prize by playing the game. You don't have to turn in tickets or anything like that. And I guess we'll see, but I'm encouraged by the fact there's not a lot of redemption, because that means that you're going to the arcade to enjoy the games and not necessarily to go get a prize, like my kids so often want to do, I feel like. So
yeah, definitely. And we actually just had one of those crane machine arcades open relatively close to here, about an hour away, and they're really heavily advertising it. And I know that's more of like a Japanese concept, and I find that very fascinating that that's kind of like making its way over here.
yeah, for sure. So actually, we had one too. The one we had is called Kawaii Claws. Is that yours as well?
No, I cannot remember the name of it. And actually, I'm not even sure if it's fully open yet, but they are advertising it very heavily for a mall that's relatively close to here. and they keep saying that they're going to do a soft opening soon.
Yeah, so the one we have here is called Kawaii Claws. It is a Japanese style arcade. All the toys are very Japanese inside of it, and the crane machines, the claw machines as well. But I tell you, it is. I love the concept. My kids love the concept, and one of the things that impressed me most, and this is kind of getting off topic, but I do want to mention this, is that at these Kawaii Claws locations, or at least ours, they have a sign up that says if you're having problems winning, let us know and we'll help you out. And so my daughter saw that sign, and we had lost like $10 probably, and she's like, "Hey, we need to ask them." And so I go up to the attendant guy and I'm like, "Hey, my daughter really wants this toy out of this claw machine, and it says you guys will help. Can you help?" And literally what they do is they stack all of the toys around the opening and make it super simple for you to win. And I thought that's so smart because our philosophy, and obviously I don't know how familiar you are with us, but our philosophy when we were operators was always that we want people to walk away with stuff. Because if they walk away with stuff, not only do they take that stuff home and remember how they won it, that also advertises to everybody else that if you come to our place, you're going to be a winner. And that's going to encourage people to play. I've been to places where all of the claw machines and all the self-redemption machines are rigged. You go up to one, it's frustrating. You spend $20-$30, you never win anything. At that point, you feel like it's a scam. And so our philosophy was like, you should win something at least every 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 plays, even if it's something small, because it encourages people to play more, and that's what you want. And so, everybody's got different philosophy on that. Like I said, there's people out there who just want the scam and just want to be able to collect their money, not worry about giving out the prizes. But I think our Japanese claw arcade is definitely doing it the right way, and I hope that the one near you will be as well. People, when you do redemption, you need to win something, even if it's something small. I feel like you need to walk away a winner. So,
yeah, it's all about making people want to come back.
Exactly. And if people feel like they're getting scammed, they're not coming back. But that, you got me on a soapbox there, Matthew. So, but that's something we're very passionate about here at Arcade Repair Tips. My co-host Tim would tell you the same thing, is like, you do want people to walk away winners. So, but I like the fact that there's not going to be as much redemption at the Chuck's Arcades. And like I said, maybe that's good, because with all the Japanese claw places coming in and different things like that, maybe they're going to serve different markets that way.
I agree. I definitely think it's a good idea that they are not leaning into redemption games. The only thing that I kind of mourn a little bit with them not doing redemption games is, well, there's not going to be an opportunity to earn any cool, like, retro Chuck E. Cheese swag. And, that is what it is. They don't really do that in their own stores anymore either. But a guy can dream.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's fantastic. I mean, even if they sold it in the store, like if it wasn't tickets, if they just had a shop where I could buy it, I think I would probably go up there and buy some of it, just because, I mean, like you said, having that nostalgic Chuck E. Cheese stuff around, there's just something about it. Of course, Tim, having worked there for so long, loves that stuff. At one time, he had the Chuck E. Cheese pizza oven, like the home model. He had like dolls and all sorts of different things from Chuck E. Cheese. That stuff is really fun to collect. And, for a lot of us, like I said, it reminds us of our childhood, which is always a good thing. So,
yeah, absolutely. Whenever they celebrated their 40th anniversary, I actually went into my local Chuck E. Cheese and bought Chuck E. Cheese 40th anniversary T-shirt, because they just don't usually have stuff like that, and that really caught my eye. And I'm glad that I got it, because it actually has like probably one of the older animations of Chuck E. Cheese from the Pizza Time Theater days, when he still had his tail, featured very prominently in everything. So that was really cool.
Oh yeah, that's a cool piece. Absolutely. So now you mentioned, obviously it sounds like this concept is set for malls. Now, one of the concerns a lot of our commenters and followers had was that a lot of the malls where they're located are dying. And so, I mean, with that in mind, do you think that this concept if this is a really great time to debut a concept that goes in malls when there are so many malls that are not doing so well, especially here in the United States?
Well, I've thought about that myself, and the thing that I keep coming back to is, at least they're doing it now while there's still malls around, because like you said, they're not on a great track to surviving. I have a local mall that still does fairly well, but it's at probably 60% occupancy, the lowest occupancy it's ever been at. Another mall is it's been a dying and dead mall for at least 15 years. I have no idea how it holds on, but their concept now is that they're bringing in like a Goodwill like location that houses a lot more items than a normal one would, and like you're seeing malls like try to extend the ideas of what they can do. So I think if they're gonna introduce a new mall arcade with such a big name as Chuck E. Cheese, now is the time to do it while there's still malls around. But thankfully, and I'm not sure if you caught this from my article, Mark Kupferman, in the very last question that was asked, hypothetically, he asked, "Is Chuck's Arcade exclusive to Simon Malls?" And he very plainly said it is not. But Simon Malls is a great partner.
Yeah, so in our mall here is a Simon Mall, and to be honest with you, Matthew, it does really well, like ours. And part of the reason why is because our mall is like the only mall within a certain amount of towns. And so like basically on the weekend, like the population of our city where we live doubles by people coming in to shop. And so that mall, because of that, is like during the week it's empty, but if you go on a weekend, it's packed. It's just full to the gills because you have all these people coming from these outside towns. And so where we live, malls are still are still pretty full, are still pretty occupied. But like you mentioned, a lot of places that's not the case. But I am encouraged, like you said, that they said this is not exclusive to Simon Malls. Maybe we could even see one pop up outside of a mall. I think that would be the hope anyway. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they have that kind of tentative plan. They want to see how it does in malls first, which, like we're kind of establishing, malls are definitely different based on where you're located. They could be doing pretty well where you're at, or you may not even have any malls left. And I actually don't have a Simon Mall very close to me, so I would love to see the concept expand outside of Simon Malls and outside of shopping malls in general. But it is a very interesting idea, and the rollout of this has been really fun to follow for that reason.
sounds good. Well, are there any additional? I'm going to kind of wrap it up here, Matthew. Are there any additional details that we need to know about Chex Arcade, or anything else you'd like to share with us about just like I said, anything in general as well, or questions you have for us? Either way, anything that you have to kind of wrap it up here.
I have noticed that Mark Hooferman said that the very first Chuck's Arcade is going to open in the Mall of Georgia. But the pictures that I saw earlier were from the Pheasant Lane Mall location in New Hampshire, and it looks just about ready to go aside from having the arcade cabinets in there. So I do wonder uh, if one is going to beat out the other, or if they're going to open them both at the same time, because they look very, very ready to open at pretty much any time as soon as they start getting the arcade cabinets in. I do believe we'll probably start seeing these locations opening by the summer.
Wow, that's a lot sooner than I would have thought. Especially considering that I feel like they never really officially announced the concept. You just kind of stumbled upon it. I kind of feel like so. The
Yeah,
fact that
there's been no press release or anything.
Yeah, so the fact that they're kind of moving forward with it so quickly is very interesting. But Matthew, I want to thank you for being with me tonight and doing this interview. Again, this is Matthew Powers from Nintendo Wire, and you guys make sure that you check out his article on Chuck's Arcade. It has a lot more detail than what we went in here on the show, and that way you can stay up to date too. I'm sure that Matthew will put out more articles about Chuck's Arcade once we find out a little bit more information about the concept. Matthew, again, thank you so much for this evening and for joining me, and we look forward to reading more about Chuck's Arcade in the future.
Jonathan, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course, take care, and we'll see you soon.
Absolutely, you too.